Hey crew, we are back to take the next step on the wooden coaster project. We should have finished up our Inventor work with a drawing file where we are placing our coasters, and if you had one coaster that you're going to make 4 different times, you just need one copy of the view. If you were doing a theme where each coaster has a unique design, then you want to place all 4 on the sheet of paper. If you were doing a coaster that had a bunch of text, then you would have something that looks like this. If you did something a little bit more advanced, perhaps, like a little lake map coaster, you would have needed to use the map in the part file to get the lake shape created. And then we bring that map back in on this while we are sketching on the view, because we want to be able to add the roads around. So there are times when we do the line work right on the drawing sheet of paper versus on the part file, because you can't extrude lines. Other things that come to mind are like nets, maybe like fishing line and just random things. But when you need line work, or even if you're doing like a car and you wanted to put detail lines on a car, you get the main car shape maybe made in the part file, but then you do detail lines here in a sketch on this view. But again, once that's all done, we export all of these sheets by PDF. Then we are ready to go down to the Windows button. Go up here to All Apps, and we are looking for Adobe Illustrator. Let's go ahead and open that up and double click that. I already have my running to save a little bit of time. And you can see you'll get some kind of window. It'll probably ask you if you're a first time user. You might need to sign into Creative Cloud, answer a few things about running the program, but then we will go a File Open to get to your files. And you're going to want to navigate to that Group Drive folder. Group Drive, Teachers and Students, J to Janota, Course CAD, and then your particular class folder to your name, or hopefully you have your shortcuts on the side and you can just jump right there as well. So go ahead and open up your PDF. Once you get your PDF open, we are going to make sure your Illustrator looks like mine. All right. And we do that by going up here to this switch workspace icon. It's kind of it's like a screen with a sidebar. Click on that, and you want to make sure you are imprinting and proofing, so that way your Illustrator looks like mine. And then now you should see icons that look like mine over on the side here. You might be on a different tab by default. I forgot exactly how it opens up, but you can just always switch to whichever one I have going at that time. We can also do a Control R on the keyboard. That brings up the rulers. And then once you put your arrow on a ruler, you can right click and switch it to inches. So it's something that we can actually understand. Let's see, what else in here? Oh, to move around in Illustrator, you need to roller click and hold to drag around, just like you do in Inventor. You can also space bar left click hold, but most people just do the roller click because it's the same as Inventor. If you want to zoom in or out, it's Alt and roller. So Alt and roller, and it zooms wherever your mouse is. Drag that around. And that's really the 2 big tools that we use a lot in here. Let's see, now what else in here? I think that's really about it. I have a few different examples here, and I can kind of jump around, so you might be able to jump around in this video to get to the one that matches what you're doing the most, but I'm going to completely go through this one and I'll talk briefly about the others. So once we get something in Illustrator opened up with a PDF, we need to go over to the layers right here, the little stacked paper icon. Hit the arrow next to that. Now, if I remember right, your layers window will open up kind of small like this, so grab that little dotted bar at the bottom and drag it way down. The taller this is, the lot easier it is to use. And we're going to click the arrow on the bottom. So it looks like this. We'll click the arrow next to layer 1, the arrow next to the first group. Once we have that group expanded, you can see there's a clipping path at the top of all of these. It's just a really it happens every time we export from Inventor. And that clipping path, if I select it and zoom way out, you can see it's this big box that's kind of over everything. That's kind of like a force field. It just prevents us from selecting and working on things the way we want. So the best thing to do is just get rid of it. We just don't need it in here. So to get rid of it, you just click directly on the word here, that row, So it highlights and then trash can it. And I'll close that group, open up the next group, go to that clipping path, trash can, which really just gets rid of the whole group anyway. And now we are ready to start modifying our PDF. All right, then we're going to go over to our left. We're going to go down and click on the white arrow here. That is a direct select tool. And you can also see there's a shortcut that says A. So if you want to use A on the keyboard and remember that, you're welcome to. And what we need to do is we need to start converting lines in here. So lines and filled in regions are what tell the laser what to engrave. So anything shaded black is going to engrave. And any certain type of lines thicker lines will engrave, really thin lines will cut. So we have to just prep this a little bit. So what we're going to do then is click inside the filled areas with our direct select tool. So I'm going to carefully click in the black, and if I need to, use zoom way in to make it really easy. So I click inside the filled area, I go over to my layers and I see the dot where it's selected, and I come back over and I use the eyeball to shut it off. I'm going to shut off all the filled area. So I click inside of this filled area, see the selection, go across and eyeball that off, and left click inside the star to select, see which one that is in the selection, and then I can eyeball that off here. Once all my filled areas are shut off, I can just drag a box around everything else that's left. Oops. A little bit of a lag there. Drag a box around everything else that's left and use the delete key to get rid of it all. That does not delete my shapes. It just deletes the lines behind them, because that's a little glitch with Inventor. Inventor puts double lines on all of the filled in areas. So now that those are gone, I can turn the little eyeballs back on and I'm good. Okay, so that's how we turn things on and off for visibility or to not select them. Now actually, in hindsight, I'm going to turn those right back off, because now I can drag a box to select my border. All right, so see my border is all selected, and I'm going to change the weight of that. Just a swipe highlight there, swipe and highlight, 0.001, enter. And that makes all these lines super thin. And like super thin lines are what do the cutting. Now I can go turn the eyeballs back on for those filled in areas, and my coaster is ready to be lasered. Now that it is prepped, I will make more copies. So I drag a box. It was still on direct select, so I switch back to the other arrow for general selection. I hold Alt, and you see that little icon. Zoom in a little bit here if I can. You'll see a little icon, little black and white arrow now, so it doubles up. When I hold the Alt, you'll get that double arrow. That is when I can left click hold and drag over to make a copy. And if I keep them aligned, there we go. And you don't need a whole lot of space between the coasters. The laser is pretty accurate. And then let go. Now I'll click off, and then I'll drag a box again. Oop, something wrong with my mouse here. I'll drag a box again, selecting both coasters, and one more time I'll do Alt again. There's that double arrow, and drag down to make a copy this way. And right there, let go. Click off. Now you can see those two are pretty tight right there. And I probably would be okay, but I might do a Control Z to undo it and just try that drag one more time. If I'm ever not happy, just like Inventor, just undo it and try it again. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Now your coaster should not be touching the edges of the sheets either, because that's probably the edge of the wood when it goes in the laser. So you got to leave a little bit of room on the sides and the top and the bottom. This is now done. We would be ready to hit print. Okay, and then go through all the settings for that. But let me go through a few other things. If this was your best example, then you can probably skip ahead to the print settings, look for the little sections or chapters on the bottom of the video to skip ahead. Alright, so if you did a set of 4 coasters, still the first thing we have to do is turn off those clipping masks. So I go expand the arrow next to layer 1, expand the arrow next to that first group, highlight that clipping mask, trash can it. I can close this arrow for a moment, go to the next group, get that one, widen this out, clipping path. I think I was saying clipping mask, sorry, clipping path. trash can it, and there it's gone. And now we go to the same routine. So for every filled in region, I need to shut the filled areas off. So I just go switch to my direct select tool, the white arrow, click inside of an area, find it highlighted. There blue is, tagging it, go over, eyeball. Click inside the hammer. It is right there, shut it off. Each ring on cap shield. Now the other thing you might notice is there's a pattern that usually the filled in regions are at the top, which is a handy thing because you really probably could just start clicking the eyeballs to shut off all those groups or those filled in areas, and there we are. I can now start dragging boxes. Oops, click off. That doesn't matter that I moved it. Drag a box to select what's left behind. Delete. Delete. I think if I drag and just touch them, yep, delete. I had to use delete twice. There, because it wasn't really in the box, but it was part of that group, so that's why it recognizes it. And then I can turn the eyeballs all back on. You can actually click and drag to turn all the eyeballs back on at once. That is prepped. There's no extra lines behind these images that are going to do cuts. Now the circles still need to be converted. So the best thing might have been to actually convert them while these are still off. I tend to forget that. There we go. I can now group select all these by dragging a box, go back to the regular arrow, and then back down in the bottom right on weight. Double click to highlight it, 0.001, enter, changes the line weights. You see them go thin, click off to confirm it. Go back in here to turn the eyeballs back on, and you're good to go. Now that one's actually done. Next example. If that was a good example for you and you're ready to print, then just skip ahead in the YouTube video to the print area. Otherwise, I'm going to move on for the next person. Perhaps you made a coaster that has font. I had to trace all these out, with an image. I drew all the lines and arcs and curves to make it look the way I wanted. Alt and roller to zoom in a little bit. First thing I have to do in every file is expand the layer, expand that first group, highlight the clipping path, delete, close that, expand that one, highlight, delete. Then I can use my direct select tool and I can actually select the things I want. But now that's done, I can re-expand this. And once again, if you click inside the filled areas, it'll highlight blue here, and then you know which eyeball to shut off. And I'll do another one, for example, Alt and roller, so it's easy to select. There's another one, that little guy right there. Yeah. The symbols are deceiving because they show everything. So like a little tiny triangle looks bigger than the G almost. But you kind of start to get used to seeing it. There we can eyeball that one off. As I said before, what usually happens, most of the filled areas are at the top, so I think I can just eyeball these right off without even having to necessarily select them. Yeah, look at that. That's looking pretty good. And then I can drag a box that highlights all of this and delete. Delete twice if it wasn't quite in the box. While the font is shut off still, I can actually drag a box that selects all of this outside coaster. Double click on the weight or the stroke weight to highlight it. So double click to highlight it, 0.001, enter, changes all those lines to thin, and then I can come back in here and turn on all those areas, or left click, hold, and drag to, my mouse is acting a little goofy, there we go. So sometimes you just gotta click, I guess. All right, but that turns it all back, that is prepped. So we got rid of all the extra lines around our filled areas. We converted the outside line to a thin line. Looks great. If you're ready to print, jump ahead to that section of the video. Square coaster with a lake map. This one's a little bit more unique. Not sure how many people would really need this, but I thought I'd just touch on it briefly. Zoom in a little bit. First things first, I use the arrow to expand these groups. I gotta always delete that clipping path out of every group, which I know ends up just deleting that whole group there. Looks good. I need to turn the lake. So if I click inside the lake, I'm on the direct select tool, the white arrow. Click once inside here. It's that one. I eyeball it. I can then click on the outline again and press delete, delete. That gets rid of the lake outline. I can now, this is a little bit different. You have all these lines here, right? This line right here is Highway 41 through Oshkosh up into Appleton. So I might want to actually take that line. I clicked on it one time and then go down here to stroke and make that a little thicker so it looks like a major road. And then click off to see what that looks like. In fact, I'm going to turn that lake back on to kind of see how that looks. Yep, looks good. Highway 10 across the top is also kind of a pretty major, it's a 4-lane road now too. So I left click once on it. I come back over here to stroke and I bring that up to 3 or 4 to match the other one. And the rest of the roads are kind of a little bit more 2-lane or so. So you can see how there's options then to adjust the line weight. You could add the Highway 41 symbol or Highway 10 or an City of Appleton sign. There's a lot of options here. But that's the difference between the filled region. You still got to shut that outside line off so you don't accidentally do any cutting. And then for the individual line work, those you can just change the thicknesses of very easily to make it look the way you want. Now in here, the only other thing left is that I still need to change the stroke of this outside shape. So I could try to shut off all the lines and arcs, or sometimes it is just as easy to hold shift and go around and click on each item like that. I'm clicking on each little segment there. So I clicked on 8 pieces, 4 lines, 4 corners. You can see them all highlighted over here. It wasn't that hard to do. And now with those all selected, I can go change their weight in the stroke panel to 0.001, enter, and then click off. That is now ready to do cutting. Thin, super thin lines cut, thick lines just engrave. All right, so we went through a few varieties of prepping coasters. Hopefully one of those scenarios worked best for you. We're ready to print. So let's go up here, File, Print. There we go. All right, we are going to switch the printer to the 1164 laser. We're going to change the media size to Legend 4848. Now you can tap L on the keyboard 11 times, I believe it is. It'll highlight the 4848, Legend 4848. It's by far the if you don't have to count, but definitely just use the L on the keyboard to go through all the L options to find this one. Then we're going to place it in the top left corner. We're going to make sure it's the first option for rotation, just regular portrait mode here, which we have to do that again later, but make sure it's set now. And then we'll go to setup. You can click this box that says don't show again, and then just continue. And if it didn't auto switch here, make sure you switch it back to 1164 laser again. And then we're going to go more settings. And you should see this blue window. That's the significant, much detail the engravings perhaps have. We need to make sure we always check autofocus and vector grid. The thickness of the coaster project is 0.19. We're rounding up that 1875 number, the 3/16 rounding up. And we are going to break our job into 2 chunks. The first job is going to be rastering. Okay, raster means engrave, and that's these settings here. I kind of skipped ahead to this, but we got to come back to offset. When we do engraving, there are sometimes we want that engraving to show up a little bit darker. So we're actually going to add an offset in here of 0.2 because we want the laser to be a little bit out of focus, so it actually burns the wood a little bit more to produce a little bit more contrast, so it looks nice. Okay, now we got those all set. We're going to go into our settings actually. The speed would be 65. The power is 100. And that is it. And how do I know these numbers besides off the top of my head? Well, you would look on the website. And I'm going to move this over here in just a second. There we go. On the website, equipment, laser, instructions. Click here for settings, big red button. Here is the setting page for how to know what to use in here. And here's wood for material. And we're doing text, clip art, text engraving, 600 DPI. There's that 65S for speed and 100p for power. And if I was doing cutting down below, I would look for the settings right down there. And because it's 3/16, we round up to quarter. And therefore our settings will be this 5/110 in just a minute. But anyway, main thing is there's a page to know where all these numbers are. We can now click OK. We can print. And right here, this is something new, and I don't know if this will always be that way, but at the moment, this auto change, we have to make sure we set this back to portrait mode before we actually click print. And once you do there, that just sent the print job or the raster job to the laser. That's the engraving. And now we're going to go right back into File, Print. At least it should remember some of this, I hope. Back into Setup. Remembers this time. More settings. Autofocus, Vector Grid. Check both those. If you don't, it'll crash the machine. 0.19. This time no offset. We are going to do vectoring, which means cutting. So we don't need to do any offset value. The settings on this one for the coaster project are 5. And I'm double clicking these numbers to highlight them. And 110. So I double click and I just start typing. I don't backspace. If you backspace, you get a warning box. So you just got to learn to double click, type. Double click, type. Double click, type. 110. Now you might be asking, what about that combined? Why don't we just do it all at once? Well, we used to. But then we realized that sometimes when we're having cutting issues, we would have to like rerun an entire job, the engraving and the cutting, just to try to get the cut. So we just learned that a few more minutes at the computer can save us a lot of time at the laser if we have any issues. So we just break all of our jobs into an engraving job and then a cutting job. And those numbers are all set. I can click OK. One last thing, you don't have to worry about these numbers here. That doesn't matter. But anyway, click OK. Click Print. Watch this. Oh, it's switched again. Click that back to land or portrait. And then now you can print and send job 2 to the laser. Hopefully your file has some kind of initials at the front of it. That's the easiest thing to do to know which job is being run on the laser. And that really kind of wraps it up. So you would now go to the laser. If you haven't run it before, make sure you please ask me on how to set it up, making sure the compressed air is on, the filter's on, and how to get it just basically prepped and ready to go. It's pretty easy, but it's definitely nice to see it done once or twice before you do it on your own. Hope that helps. We'll see you in the next video.